Hello, and welcome to our podcast, where today's topic of discussion is leadership within the events industry. Long story short, in traditional terms, leaders would lead their team or followers to war, to food, or to their other basic needs and necessities at the time. Even though this definition has evolved and different leadership approaches have developed, the essence remains the same. People look to a leader to help them do what they couldn't without one. Nordhaus confirms this with his definition of leadership as a process whereby an individual influences a group of individuals to achieve a common goal. Leadership is a complex process, having multiple dimensions including different leadership approaches, traits, and styles, all of which will be discussed further through the application of theory to a modern-day case study. Michael Eavis. Michael Eavis started out as a dairy farmer and developed the idea for the iconic Glastonbury Festival from nothing in a time of great change and revolution in the UK in the late 1960s. The idea was pitched after visiting Bath Blues Festival in 1970. Glastonbury Festival is now the world's biggest outdoor music and performing arts festival, offering a unique experience consisting of accommodation, entertainment, food, and beverages. The festival has clearly come a long way over the last 50 years, and although it took today's Glastonbury Festival several years to generate some form of profit margin, today it focuses on raising almost £2 million per year to support Greenpeace, Oxfam, WaterAid, as well as a few local causes. Michael Eavis continues to promote awareness and assistance for local and international issues, taking social housing as just one example. He was voted one of the top 100 most influential people ever, and Glastonbury has earned him a CBE, an exhibition at the Victoria and Albert Museum in London, honorary degrees and a fellowship, and a position as a cultural icon to millions. This brief overview of the history of Eavis and Glastonbury shows that his approach to leadership has a deep foundation in his personal beliefs of sustainability and motivation to do social good. Looking towards his sense of clearly successful leadership skills, the increasing number of attendees and acts at Glastonbury means he faces the ever-increasing challenge of sustainable event management, something incredibly prevalent in today's society. From the organisation perspective of running an event, Caspar describes this as economic developments that serve current needs without having a negative social or environmental impact on future generations. Using this year as an example, the post-festival cleanup is a situation in which Eavis faces issues such as 5,500 tents, 6,500 sleeping bags, and 800,000 million gallons of waste being left behind by festival goers. This issue has been faced ever since the festival started, but what concerns us here is how the result of the issue is improved. Eavis' sustainable event management practice has been illustrated through his approach to single-use plastic, for one. 85 tons of plastic bottles and cans were left by attendees this year, and Eavis and his daughter have vowed that this just isn't good enough. From now on, single-use plastic is banned, and the BBC reported that attendees were encouraged to bring a reusable bottle and fill them up from any of the hundreds of free water taps on site. When it comes to the situation and the sustainability of leadership, perhaps the transformational leadership style is one of the most relevant theories applicable to Eavis. Explained by James McGregor Burns in 1978, this is the process of creating a connection that raises the degree of motivation and morality during the engagement between the leader and the follower. So, how does the transformational approach work? It is leaders initiating, developing, and implementing significant changes in their organisation. Transformational leaders achieve this by raising individuals' consciousness regarding certain issues so that they think of others before their own self-interest. Typically, a transformational leader will become a strong role model as a result of their own high standards of moral and ethical conduct. Christie et al. In 2011 proposed the 4 dimensions of transformational leadership, which are idealized influence, inspirational motivation, intellectual stimulation, and individual consideration. These 4 dimensions can be examined through Michael Eavis' actions, for example, banning the use of single-use plastic bottles and recruiting volunteers from charities who litter pick to raise funds, which can all be seen as the implementation of Eavis' transformational approach. As a leader, this inserts motivational and ethical approaches into the relationship between the followers and the public. Nowadays, leaders within organisations are increasingly expected to take responsibility for effects brought to their followers, their consumers, the whole society, and the natural environment. Encouraging the sustainable engagements between stakeholders, leaders are expected to create value and achieve the goal of corporate responsibility behind the headlines. The outcomes are to be reflected in the triple bottom line, and EVIS seems to have succeeded with the equipment of quality, sustainable leadership by leading and inspiring whole events corporations to also do so. This is an example of EVIS achieving a macro influence with global reach through his transformational leadership style. Despite the apparent successes of this, there are some weaknesses to the theory. Breiman, in 1992, stated that transformational leadership treats leadership as a personality trait or a personal predisposition rather than a behavior that people can learn. This means that it is a leadership style that someone is born with rather than taught, and therefore is not widely achievable. Furthermore, transformational leadership has the potential to be abused. It can be used by a leader to influence followers' actions and outcomes. However, if the followers do not question the leader, they may be following a bad direction. One of the most volatile areas of leadership always tends to be human resource management, and this is exactly what we find here. His daughter taking some responsibilities from him during the planning process was said to have resulted in frequent dynamic arguing. As this situation was something he created, he found it hard to relinquish control. Applying a situational leadership theory approach to the circumstances here, we can analyse what happened and how it maybe could have been handled better. Situational leadership is constructed around the idea that employees move forward and backward along the development spectrum, and the theory consists of the behaviour pattern of someone who influences others, and is defined by the relationship between the level of directive and supportive behaviours toward their subordinates. This matrix is divided into 4 sections: directing, coaching, supporting, and delegating. The level of directive behaviour details mostly one-way communication from the leader, that is, the level of clarification and guidance given, and the supportive behaviour is a two-way line of communication between the leader and subject, often correlating with the level of comfort. Applying it to the situation at hand, it seems that EVIS showed the low support, low directive category in leading the situation, where his daughter would have reacted much better, and so he would have too, if he used the high support technique, most likely the high support, low direction, which is the category labelled supporting. There is a leadership principle that explains to preserve power, a leader should relinquish control. This is part of the participatory leadership theory, which explains that the ideal leadership style is one in which you take input from others. This case is slightly different because it's not just an employee or colleague, it's his daughter, but still shows that if he'd have used a participatory leadership style, these conflicts would have been avoided by maybe sharing ideas from both sides and drawing conclusions, or trusting that the person you've allowed to make decisions will do their job properly. Contingency theory was one of the first instances where leadership research shifted from focusing on the leader to focusing on the situation in which the leader is placed. The strength of this situational-based analysis is that it is backed by a lot of evidence and is actually predictive of effectiveness rather than relying on mere description. However, it remains criticised on the face of validity and workability, especially with ongoing organisations. Even though empirical results can be drawn from associated tests, it is not entirely coherent with regards to how they can be used to engineer the situations moving forward. Fielder's least preferred co-worker theory explains how leaders prioritise between task focus and people focus. Relationship, power, and task structure are 3 key factors that drive effective styles. However, with the involvement of immediate family members, it is difficult to distinguish between employer and employee, or in this case, father and daughter. Glastonbury for EVIS is his project, or one could say another one of his children, therefore elucidating the impression that he would not want to lose control over the decision-making when his daughter became involved in the process. While this may be true, mutual agreements and level of respect between EVIS and his daughter would have allowed the running of the event to be a lot smoother. In any case, the leader always retains the right to allow them to make these decisions, but still allows and agrees to their occurrence. The opposite of this style, which one would get used to if working alone for many years, is authoritative, meaning the born right to lead as founder of a company or event, hence EVIS and Glastonbury. Authoritative leadership is defined by the focus on job requirements and far less about the people involved. They are almost seen as tools to achieve an end result. Communication is reduced to simply instructing, and this leader is often described as controlling, demanding, and overpowering. This is result-driven, with the leader's self-interest at top priority. Now, there are two ways to view any situation, either competitive or collaborative. These are essentially the same thing from a different angle. You can either see other people's thoughts, ideas, and behaviours as threats to the way you have always done things, or you can see them as a chance to learn, grow, and develop. It is much easier to explain the competitive way over the collaborative way in the same way it is historically more desirable to have a clean win over a joint accomplishment. It's just natural. Control is seductive because it creates the perception of power when really all it does is usually produce suboptimal or even average results which struggle to endure. Especially since Michael will have been doing the same thing for 50 years. Those leaders who have generally earned power will find it difficult to see how less control is a good thing. But when you come around to understanding that sometimes relinquishing control is often the way to preserve your power, as Michael did and is still doing today, the best results are produced and the healthiest workplace environment develops as a result of this good leadership technique. This is best described as the product of inclusion. There will always be many challenges faced as leader, especially in today's environment where the world is so connected and transparent, meaning that everyone can see exactly how most workplaces are run all across the world. So only the best now becomes good enough. Whether this is done by incorporating environmental sustainability policies, something Michael Eavis does well, however is still lacking for a lot, or by focusing on your people through HR techniques, which eventually ends to higher rates of employment retention and a happy workforce directly, leadership styles should always be questioned by the public, by the employees, and most importantly sometimes, the leader themselves. This is the only way to grow and lead most effectively day in and day out. Michael Eavis' legacy speaks for itself, and he is clearly a very accomplished, successful leader. He has overcome many obstacles in his way on the path to building his empire, and I'm sure it's not been entirely smooth sailing. Often, it's not the actions that define a leader, but the reactions to the situation one finds oneself in and the management of these, both positive and negative.